I was staring at my morning coffee when I noticed construction equipment parked on the edge of my private lake, and my blood pressure immediately spiked to levels that would concern any reasonable physician. My name is Bradley Lawson, and I own 43 acres of prime Montana wilderness about 20 miles outside of Whitefish. I bought this property 6 years ago with money I earned from selling my software company, and the centerpiece of the entire estate is a pristine 12-acre lake that sits dead center on my land. The property line surveys were crystal clear, and I had paid a small fortune to ensure every inch was properly documented and recorded with Flathead County. This lake was mine, fully and completely, with no easements, no shared access, nothing. Just pure, undisputed private property. But apparently, the Pinecrest Hills Homeowners Association didn't care much about property lines or legal boundaries. I walked down to the lake that Tuesday morning in early June, my boots crunching through the pine needles and wild grass. The air smelled like summer, that perfect combination of warm earth and clean water. As I got closer, I could see 3 men in orange vests unloading lumber from a flatbed truck. They had already driven wooden posts into my lake bed, and the skeletal frame of what was clearly going to be a large dock jutted out into the water. "Hey," I shouted, breaking into a jog. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" One of the workers, a heavy-set guy with a gray beard, looked up from his drill. "Building a dock should be done by Thursday." "On whose authority?" I demanded, reaching the shoreline. He shrugged and gestured to a clipboard sitting on a nearby toolbox. "HOA hired us." "Got the work order right here." I grabbed the clipboard before he could protest. Sure enough, there was a purchase order from Pinecrest Hills HOA, authorized by someone named Patricia Hendricks, president. The invoice listed materials and labor for a community fishing dock to be constructed at the lake on Pinecrest community property. "This isn't community property," I said, my voice tight. "This is my private lake on my private land. You're trespassing." The bearded worker frowned. "Look, man, we just go where we're told. The HOA lady showed us the location on a map, said it was all approved." "Well, it's not approved by me, and I own this land." I pulled out my phone. "You need to stop work immediately and leave." Another worker, younger with a red bandana tied around his head, spoke up. "We can't just stop. We've got a contract. You need to take it up with the HOA." I dialed the number listed on the work order. It rang 4 times before a woman's voice answered with crisp efficiency. "Pinecrest Hills Homeowners Association, Patricia speaking." "Patricia Hendricks?" I asked. "Yes, this is she. How may I help you?" "This is Bradley Lawson. Your construction crew is currently trespassing on my property and building an unauthorized structure on my private lake. You need to call them off immediately." There was a pause, then a laugh that made my jaw clench. "Mr. Lawson, I'm aware of your property. However, the community fishing access was approved by our board last month. The lake qualifies as a community amenity under our bylaws." "I'm not part of your HOA," I said slowly, like I was explaining basic mathematics to a child. "My property is not subject to your bylaws. This lake is entirely on my land, and you have no legal right to build anything here." "Actually, Mr. Lawson, when you purchased your property, it was designated as part of the greater Pinecrest community zone. While your residents may sit outside our direct jurisdiction, the lake itself falls within shared community resources as outlined in the county development plan from 1987. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "That's complete nonsense. I have a title deed that clearly shows this entire property, including the lake, is mine. No easements, no shared access rights, nothing." Patricia's voice took on a condescending tone that immediately reminded me of every bureaucratic nightmare I'd ever encountered. "Mr. Lawson, I understand you're upset, but this has all been properly researched and approved. The dock will benefit the entire community, including yourself. Really, you should be thanking us for the improvement to your property value. Get your workers off my land right now, or I'm calling the sheriff." "That's your right, Mr. Lawson, but I assure you we have all the proper documentation. Have a blessed day." She hung up. I stood there for a moment, phone in hand, trying to process the sheer audacity. Then I dialed the Flathead County Sheriff's Office. Deputy Marcus Chen arrived about 40 minutes later in his patrol SUV. He was a solid guy in his 30s who I'd met a few times at the local diner. I explained the situation while the construction workers sat in the shade, drinking water and checking their phones. Marcus walked the property line with me, examining the survey stakes that marked my boundaries. The construction site was a good 100 feet inside my property line. He took photos, checked the workers' permits, which listed the address as mine, and shook his head. "This is pretty straightforward trespassing," he said. "The HOA doesn't have authority to build on private property without the owner's permission." He approached the workers and had a conversation I couldn't quite hear. The bearded guy made a phone call, presumably to Patricia or whoever had hired them. After about 10 minutes of discussion, Marcus came back to me. "They're packing up," he said. "I've advised them that continuing work would constitute criminal trespass. I'm also going to file a report and send a formal notice to the HOA." "Thank you," I said, feeling some of the tension leave my shoulders. "I'd recommend you contact a property attorney," Marcus added. HOAs can be persistent, and you want to make sure you're covered legally. The workers loaded their equipment and drove off, leaving behind the wooden posts they'd already sunk into my lake bed. I spent the rest of the afternoon using a come-along winch and a lot of swearing to pull them out. By sunset, my lake looked normal again, though the disturbed sediment clouded the water near the shore. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 2 days later, I drove into town for groceries and stopped at the Whitefish Coffee Company for my usual Americano. The barista, a college student named Emma who always remembered my order, gave me an odd look as she handed over my drink. "Hey, Mr. Lawson, is it true you're trying to keep kids from having a place to fish?" I blinked. "What?" "I saw on the community Facebook page that you stopped the HOA from building a fishing dock for local families. My little brother was really excited about it." I felt heat rising in my face. "Emma, that's not what happened. The HOA tried to build on my private property without permission. The lake is on my land." She nodded slowly, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. "Oh, okay." The post made it sound different. I paid for my coffee and left, immediately pulling up Facebook on my phone. I wasn't active on social media, but I had an old account. I searched for Pinecrest Hills Community and found a group with over 800 members. The pinned post was from Patricia Hendricks, posted yesterday evening. It featured a professional photo of her, a woman in her late 40s with blonde highlighted hair, wearing a purple blazer and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The post read, "Disappointed to announce that our community fishing dock project has been halted due to opposition from a local landowner who refuses to allow our children access to nature and recreational activities." Despite the dock being approved through proper channels and designed to benefit everyone, including the landowner himself, some people value their own exclusivity over community well-being. We will continue to explore our legal options to ensure our families have access to the outdoor amenities they deserve. Please keep our children in your thoughts during this difficult time. The post had 247 likes and 156 comments, most of them expressing outrage at the unnamed, selfish landowner. Several people had apparently figured out it was me, and there were comments calling me everything from a corporate elitist to a threat to family values. I wanted to throw my phone into traffic. Instead, I called my attorney, David Richardson, who had handled the property purchase. After explaining the situation and reading him Patricia's Facebook post, he was quiet for a moment. "That's defamation," he said finally. "She's deliberately misrepresenting the facts to damage your reputation. But first things first, let me pull the property records and any relevant county documents. I want to make absolutely certain there's no obscure easement or access right that could complicate things." "There isn't," I said firmly. "I paid for the most thorough title search available when I bought this place. I believe you, but let me verify everything. In the meantime, don't engage with the HOA or respond to the social media posts. Anything you say could be used against you later if this escalates." That weekend, I was working in my garage when I heard vehicles approaching. I walked outside to find 3 trucks and an SUV parking along the dirt road that led to my property. About 15 people climbed out, several carrying fishing rods, others with coolers and folding chairs. A man in his 30s, wearing a Bass Pro Shops cap and wraparound sunglasses, waved at me. "Hey there, just heading down to the lake for some fishing. Beautiful day for it." "The lake is private property," I called out. "You're not allowed to fish here." A woman with 2 young kids frowned. "The HOA said it was community access now. We paid our dues specifically so we could use the lake." "The HOA lied to you," I said, walking closer. "This is my private property. The lake is not open to the public or to HOA members. You need to leave." The man in the cap crossed his arms. "Look, buddy, we drove all the way out here. We're just going to do some catch and release fishing. It's not hurting anyone." "It's trespassing," I said. "I'm asking you politely to leave. If you don't, I'll call the sheriff." "Are you serious right now?" Another man said, stepping forward aggressively. "We're just trying to have a nice family day and you're acting like we're criminals. You're trespassing on private property after being told to leave. That literally makes you criminals." A heated argument erupted. The group was convinced the HOA had given them legal access, and they thought I was being unreasonable. I ended up calling the sheriff's office again, and by the time Deputy Chen arrived, the situation was tense. Parents were explaining to confused children why they couldn't fish. People were filming me on their phones, and I was being called every name in the book. Marcus dispersed the group, explaining the property laws patiently while people grumbled and shot me hostile looks. As they packed up, the woman with the kids said loudly, "I can't believe someone would be so selfish. It's just water." After everyone left, Marcus walked back to where I stood. "You're going to have more of this," he said. "Word spreading that there's a fishing lake out here and people aren't understanding the private property aspect." "What can I do?" I asked. "Post signs. Lots of them. Private property, no trespassing, the works. Document everything and keep calling us when people show up. Eventually, they'll get the message." I spent the next day installing signs. I put them at the road entrance, along the driveway, at the trailheads, and all around the lake perimeter. Big, professional signs that clearly stated the property was private and trespassers would be prosecuted. Monday morning, David called me with news. "I've reviewed everything," he said. "Your property rights are rock solid. There's no easement, no historical access rights, nothing that would give the HOA any legitimate claim to your lake. The county development plan Patricia mentioned does exist, but it only applies to properties that are actually within the HOA boundaries. Yours isn't. So what do we do?" "I'm drafting a cease and desist letter to the HOA. demanding they stop misrepresenting your property as community access and requiring them to post a correction on their social media. I'm also including a demand for damages related to the defamation and the trespassing incident. Will that work? It should. If it doesn't, we can file a lawsuit for defamation, trespass, and injunctive relief. But most organizations back down once they realize they're legally in the wrong and facing real consequences. The cease and desist letter was sent via certified mail and email on Tuesday. By Wednesday afternoon, I had my answer. Patricia Hendricks showed up at my door. She was exactly what I expected. Perfectly styled blonde hair, designer sunglasses pushed up on her head, and an expression of barely contained fury. She wore white capri pants and a floral blouse that probably cost more than my monthly electric bill. "Mr. Lawson," she said with a tight smile, "we need to talk. I have nothing to say to you that my attorney hasn't already communicated," I replied. "This is getting out of hand," she said, her voice taking on a pleading tone. "I received your lawyer's threatening letter, and I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding is yours regarding property law." Her smile vanished. "You're making yourself very unpopular in this community, Mr. Lawson. People around here value cooperation and sharing. We take care of each other. We don't hoard resources." "It's not hoarding to own property legally," I said, "and you're not entitled to my land just because you want it." Patricia stepped closer, her voice dropping. "That lake is wasted on one person. There are families, children who would benefit from access. Don't you care about anyone but yourself? Don't you care about the law? You trespassed, you built without permission, you defamed me publicly, and now you're harassing me at my home. If you don't leave my property right now, I'm calling the sheriff again." Her mask of civility completely cracked. "You're going to regret this," she hissed. "You think you can just move into this area and act like you own everything. We have rights too, and we're not going to let some arrogant outsider push us around. Get off my property." She turned and stormed back to her white Lexus SUV, spraying gravel as she tore down my driveway. I called David and recounted the conversation. He was not pleased. "That sounds like a threat. Did you record it?" "No, I didn't think about it." "Start thinking about it. If she contacts you again, record everything." Montana is a one-party consent state, so you're legally allowed to record conversations you're part of. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Patricia's words and the hatred in her eyes. Around 2 in the morning, I heard an engine. I got up and looked out my bedroom window, which faced the lake. I could see headlights down by the water. I grabbed my phone and a flashlight and headed down there, my heart pounding. As I got closer, I could see it was a pickup truck, and there were people in the water. They'd brought a small aluminum boat and were launching it from my shore. "Hey," I shouted. "What are you doing?" The flashlight beam caught 3 teenage boys, maybe 16 or 17 years old, freezing like deer in headlights. One of them was waist deep in water, holding the boat. The other 2 stood on the shore with fishing rods. "Just fishing," one of them said nervously. "At 2 in the morning, on private property. Dude, we didn't think anyone would care," another kid said. "The HOA said it was cool." I was about to launch into an explanation when I heard something that made my blood run cold. There was a cracking sound from the darkness, and then a massive splash out in the lake. The boys had brought more than just themselves and a boat. They'd been setting something up. I shone my light across the water and saw it. They'd somehow managed to drag out a prefabricated dock section, probably one of the ones from the original construction order, and had been attempting to anchor it in the water. It had tipped and was now half submerged. "Are you kidding me?" I said. "You're installing a dock at 2 in the morning. It was supposed to be a surprise for the community. one of the boys stammered. "Mrs. Hendricks said if we got it installed, you couldn't make us take it down. I called the sheriff's office for the third time in a week." The boys tried to leave, but I made it clear that if they drove off, I'd report it as hit-and-run property damage. They sat miserably on the tailgate of their truck while we waited for the deputies to arrive. This time it wasn't Marcus who showed up, but a senior deputy named Sarah Williams. She was in her 40s, all business, and she was not happy to be handling a 2 in the morning call about a property dispute. The boys admitted everything. They'd been approached by Patricia Hendricks at a community event and offered $200 each to install the dock section as a community service project. She'd provided them with the dock section, which had apparently been stored at her house, and told them the best time to do it was late at night when I wouldn't notice until it was done. Deputy Williams called Patricia Hendricks at 2:45 in the morning, and I enjoyed every second of listening to one side of that conversation. The deputy's face grew progressively more severe as Patricia apparently tried to explain away her involvement. "Madam, you solicited minors to commit criminal trespass and property damage on your behalf. That's conspiracy and it's serious. I need you to come to the station tomorrow morning to give a statement, or I will come to your home with a warrant. Do you understand?" The boys were cited for trespassing and released to their parents, who had to be called and woken up. One of the mothers cried when she saw the situation, and I almost felt bad, but not bad enough to not press charges. The dock section had to be removed, which required a tow truck and a lot of effort on Friday morning. I sent the bill to Patricia Hendricks via my attorney. David was ecstatic when I told him about the night's events. "This is exactly what we need," he said. "She's escalating in ways that are clearly illegal. The sheriff's office is involved, there's documentation, and we have minors as witnesses to her conspiracy to commit property damage. I just want this to stop," I said, suddenly exhausted. "It will. She's gone way too far and she knows it. I'm going to push for a restraining order along with our civil suit. She won't be able to contact you or come near your property." The following Tuesday, I had to appear at the Flathead County Courthouse for a restraining order hearing. Patricia was there with her own attorney, a slick-looking guy in an expensive suit who kept whispering in her ear. The judge, an older woman named Judge Carolyn Martinez, reviewed the case file with a deepening frown. David presented the timeline of events: the initial trespassing and construction, the defamatory social media posts, Patricia's threatening visit to my home, and finally the conspiracy to have minors install the dock in the middle of the night. Patricia's attorney argued that it was all a misunderstanding blown out of proportion, that his client was simply trying to serve her community, and that I was being vindictive and unreasonable. Judge Martinez was not buying it. "Counselor, your client repeatedly violated Mr. Lawson's property rights despite clear legal notice. She then recruited minors to commit crimes on her behalf. I don't see a misunderstanding here. I see a pattern of deliberate illegal behavior." She granted a temporary restraining order, prohibiting Patricia from contacting me or coming within 500 feet of my property. She also ordered Patricia to post a correction on the HOA social media, stating that the lake was private property and not open to community access. As we left the courtroom, Patricia tried to approach me, but her attorney grabbed her arm and pulled her back, whispering urgently. The look she gave me could have melted steel. Over the next week, the HOA Facebook page exploded. Patricia had posted the court-mandated correction, but she'd worded it in the most passive-aggressive way possible. "Due to legal action, we must inform the community that the lake previously discussed as a potential amenity is claimed as private property by Bradley Lawson. We continue to believe community access would benefit everyone and are exploring all legal avenues. Please respect the posted property boundaries to avoid legal consequences. The comments were predictably toxic. Half the people blamed me for being selfish, while others started questioning Patricia's leadership and the HOA's use of funds. Someone pointed out that the dock construction would have cost thousands of dollars in HOA dues, and there'd been no community vote. Factions formed, arguments raged, and the whole situation became the primary drama of the Pinecrest Hills community. I tried to ignore it, but it was hard when I went into town and people gave me dirty looks at the grocery store. Someone left a nasty note on my truck windshield calling me a corporate parasite. The barista at the coffee shop was suddenly cold and efficient instead of friendly. Then things got weird. I started finding dead fish on my driveway, just left there, rotting in the sun. It happened 3 times over 2 weeks. I reported it to the sheriff's office, but there was no way to prove who was doing it. My mailbox was knocked over twice, bashed with what looked like a baseball bat. I installed a security camera, and 2 days later, someone spray painted the lens. The footage before it was covered showed a figure in dark clothing and a ski mask, completely unidentifiable. I upgraded my security system, installing cameras all around the property with cloud backup. The harassment continued, but in more subtle ways. Trash was occasionally dumped at the end of my driveway. Someone let the air out of all 4 of my truck tires while it was parked at the hardware store. David filed additional complaints and documented everything, but proving Patricia was behind it was difficult. The restraining order meant she couldn't do it herself, but she had plenty of supporters who might act on her behalf. One evening in late July, I was grilling dinner on my deck when I saw smoke rising from the direction of the lake. I ran down there with a fire extinguisher to find someone had set fire to one of my no trespassing signs. The wooden post was burning, and the flames were spreading to the dry grass around it. I put out the fire and called 911. The volunteer fire department showed up along with the sheriff, and we managed to keep it from spreading into a wildfire, but it was close. Too close. The firefighters confirmed it was deliberately set and there was an accelerant used. "This is arson," Deputy Williams said, examining the scene. "This isn't harassment anymore. This is a felony." The sheriff's office launched a full investigation. They pulled footage from my security cameras and found a clip of a car driving slowly past my property entrance around the time of the fire, but the license plate wasn't visible. I was scared now, genuinely scared. Someone was escalating to violence, and my isolated property suddenly felt vulnerable rather than peaceful. I started sleeping with my phone next to the bed and kept my shotgun loaded in the safe. David filed for an emergency hearing, presenting evidence of the escalating harassment and the arson. Judge Martinez was visibly angry when she reviewed the case. "Mr. Hendricks needs to appear before this court," she said to Patricia's attorney. "I want her to explain why she shouldn't be held in contempt for violating the spirit of the restraining order, even if she's not directly committing these acts." Patricia appeared in court the following week, and she looked different. The confident, aggressive HOA president was gone, replaced by someone who looked stressed and tired. Her attorney did most of the talking, insisting she had nothing to do with the harassment or the arson. "Your Honor, my client has strictly complied with the restraining order. She cannot be held responsible for the actions of third parties, regardless of any perceived connection to the HOA dispute." Judge Martinez stared at Patricia. "Mrs. Hendricks, you created a situation where Mr. Lawson has been vilified in your community. Your social media posts and public statements have painted him as an enemy. Now his property is being vandalized and someone committed arson. Do you feel any responsibility for creating this hostile environment? Patricia's voice was quiet. I never told anyone to hurt him or damage his property. I just wanted what was best for the community. By violating his legal rights, the judge said sharply. Actions have consequences, Mrs. Hendricks. I'm extending the restraining order to 12 months and adding a provision that you must post a full, unambiguous retraction and apology on all HOA communication channels. If any further harassment or damage occurs to Mr. Lawson's property, I will hold you in contempt and consider criminal charges, regardless of whether I can prove direct involvement. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, Patricia whispered. The apology was posted that afternoon. It was brief and clearly written by her attorney. I, Patricia Hendricks, apologize to Bradley Lawson for misrepresenting his property rights and for any harassment or difficulties caused by my actions. The lake on Mr. Lawson's property is his private property, and neither the HOA nor community members have any legal access to it. I ask the community to respect Mr. Lawson's rights and cease any hostile actions toward him or his property. The comments on the post were a mixed bag. Some people supported Patricia and felt she was being forced to grovel. Others were angry that the HOA had wasted money and created legal problems. A few people actually apologized to me directly, sending private messages acknowledging they'd been caught up in the drama without knowing all the facts. The harassment stopped after that. No more dead fish, no more vandalism, no more fires. The security cameras showed my property staying peaceful, with only the occasional deer or elk wandering through, but I knew it wasn't over. Not really. In early August, I received notice that the HOA was suing me. The lawsuit claimed that I had damaged community relations, caused emotional distress to HOA members, and interfered with the HOA's legitimate governance activities. They were seeking damages for the cost of the dock materials and construction, plus additional compensation for reputational harm. David laughed when he read the lawsuit. "This is frivolous," he said. "They're trying to intimidate you into settling, but they have no legal basis. We'll file a motion to dismiss, and I'll be shocked if it survives." He was right. The judge dismissed the lawsuit within 3 weeks, calling it entirely without merit and warning the HOA's attorney about filing frivolous claims. But the dismissal came with something extra. David had filed a counterclaim for all my legal expenses, the property damage, emotional distress, and punitive damages for the harassment campaign. Now we were on the offensive. Discovery was brutal for the HOA. David subpoenaed their financial records, meeting minutes, email communications, and social media records. What we found was damning. The HOA had spent over $15,000 on the dock project without a proper vote or community approval. Patricia had authorized the expense unilaterally, claiming it was within her discretionary budget. The money had come from HOA dues, and many members had no idea their money was being used for a project on property the HOA didn't even own. Even worse, we found emails between Patricia and several HOA board members discussing strategies to pressure me into allowing community access. One email explicitly mentioned making my life difficult until I saw reason. Another discussed spreading negative information about me to turn community sentiment. David was in his element. This is conspiracy, defamation, and misuse of HOA funds. We're not just going after Patricia anymore. We're going after the whole board. The case dragged through the fall. I gave depositions, answered interrogatories, and provided mountains of documentation. The legal process was exhausting and expensive, even though David was confident we'd win and recover costs. In October, something unexpected happened. I received a letter, not from Patricia or the HOA, but from a group calling themselves Concerned Pinecrest Residents. It was signed by over 100 people and delivered to my attorney's office. The letter apologized for the harassment and acknowledged that I was legally in the right. It explained that many community members had been misled by Patricia's presentation of the situation and hadn't understood the full legal picture. They asked if there might be any way to reach a compromise, suggesting that perhaps I might consider allowing limited, supervised fishing access for community youth programs in exchange for the HOA covering all my legal costs and providing some form of compensation. I read the letter 3 times, considering it carefully. Part of me wanted to tell them to forget it, that they'd burned any bridge to goodwill. But another part of me remembered those kids who'd been excited about fishing, the families who genuinely thought they were doing something wholesome. "What do you think?" I asked David. He shrugged. "It's your property, Bradley. You're under no obligation to grant access. But if you wanted to explore some kind of limited arrangement, we could draft an agreement with very specific terms and protections." I thought about it for a week. Finally, I drafted a response through David, outlining a proposal. I would allow supervised fishing access for organized youth groups up to 6 times per year, on dates scheduled at least 30 days in advance. The HOA would pay $20,000 to cover my legal costs and damages. Patricia Hendricks would resign as HOA president. And most importantly, the HOA would grant me a permanent, recorded easement acknowledging my sole ownership and control of the lake, with severe penalties for any future unauthorized access. The proposal went to the HOA board, minus Patricia. I heard through the grapevine that there were heated debates. Patricia, still technically president, opposed any settlement and wanted to continue fighting. But the rest of the board, facing mounting legal bills and angry homeowners, pushed back. A special HOA meeting was called in November, and I actually attended. The community center was packed with people, many of whom I'd never met. There was tension in the air, but also exhaustion. Everyone was tired of the drama. The board president pro tem, a reasonable guy named Robert Chen, presented the settlement proposal to the membership. He explained the legal situation clearly, acknowledged the mistakes that had been made, and recommended accepting my offer. Patricia stood up to speak against it. She gave an impassioned speech about not surrendering to bullies, about fighting for community rights, about principles versus convenience. Then a woman in the back stood up. She was in her 30s, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, and she looked tired. "Patricia, can I ask you something?" "Of course, Jennifer," Patricia said, still in her element. "Did you ever actually verify that we had legal access to that lake before you spent $15,000 of our money?" The room went silent. Patricia's mouth opened and closed. "I did research. I found documentation that suggested community access." "That's not what I asked," Jennifer said. "Did you verify it? Did you talk to a property attorney? Did you do a title search?" "The board trusted my judgment," Patricia said defensively. "That's a no," another man said from the side. "You spent our money and started a legal war without doing basic due diligence." The tide turned. Person after person stood up, not to attack me, but to question Patricia's leadership and decision-making. The meeting got heated, but eventually a vote was called. The settlement was accepted by a margin of 73 to 28. Patricia resigned the next day, sending a brief email to the HOA board without fanfare or explanation. I heard later that she and her husband put their house up for sale and moved to Bozeman before Christmas. The settlement was finalized in December. I received a check for $20,000, and the HOA recorded the easement acknowledging my property rights. In return, I signed an access agreement allowing supervised youth fishing programs up to 6 times per year, with strict rules about behavior, trash, and liability. The first fishing event happened in May of the following year. It was a program for kids from the local Boys and Girls Club, supervised by 2 adults and a volunteer from Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks, who taught the kids about conservation and catch and release fishing. I watched from my deck as a dozen kids, ranging from maybe 8 to 14 years old, learned to cast and actually caught a few decent-sized trout. Their excitement was genuine and infectious. When they left, they cleaned up every piece of trash, and the volunteer came up to my house to thank me personally. "This is a great thing you're doing," she said. "A lot of these kids never get opportunities like this." I nodded, feeling something complicated in my chest. Pride, maybe, or satisfaction, or just relief that the whole nightmare was finally over. But it wasn't quite finished. In June, I was contacted by the Montana Attorney General's office. They'd received information about Patricia Hendricks and the HOA board's financial practices, and wanted to investigate potential misuse of HOA funds. It turned out that the dock project wasn't the only questionable expenditure. Patricia had been using HOA money for personal expenses, disguised as community leadership costs, expensive dinners listed as board meetings, shopping trips labeled as decoration purchases for community events. I provided all the documentation we'd gathered during discovery. The investigation took several months, but by September, Patricia was charged with theft and misappropriation of funds. It wasn't related to my case directly, but to the broader pattern of financial misconduct the investigation uncovered. She pleaded guilty to reduced charges in December and was sentenced to probation, community service, and ordered to pay restitution to the HOA. Her name appeared in the local paper, and I felt a strange mix of vindication and sadness. She destroyed her reputation, her standing in the community, and nearly faced jail time, all because she couldn't accept that she didn't have the right to something that wasn't hers. As I sit here now, in my living room overlooking my private lake, I think about everything that happened. The stress, the harassment, the legal battles, the money spent, and the relationships damaged. Was it worth it to defend my property rights so aggressively? The answer for me is yes. Not because I'm selfish or don't care about the community, but because property rights and the rule of law matter. If I'd given in to Patricia's initial demands, it would have set a precedent that anyone with enough audacity could take what they wanted if they dressed it up as community benefit or for the children. I've had 3 more youth fishing events since that first one, and I've actually started to enjoy hosting them. I make sure to talk to the kids, teach them about respecting nature and private property, and emphasize that the privilege of fishing here is a gift, not a right. The Pinecrest Hills HOA has new leadership now, people who seem focused on actual community improvement rather than territorial expansion. They've been respectful and professional in all our interactions regarding the fishing access program. My relationship with the broader community has improved too. Once people understood the full story, many of them came around. I'm not universally loved, but I'm no longer the villain in their narrative. I'm just a guy who owned some land and was willing to defend it. The signs are still up around my property. Private property, no trespassing, violators will be prosecuted. They're a necessary reminder, even if they're not the most welcoming sight. But near the access point where the youth groups come for fishing, I've added another sign. Welcome to Lawson Lake Youth Fishing Program. Respect nature, Practice conservation. Leave no trace. It's a small thing, but it matters. It shows that defending your rights doesn't mean you can't also be generous on your own terms. The difference is choice. I choose to allow limited access. It wasn't taken from me, demanded from me, or stolen from me. On quiet evenings, I still walk down to the lake and sit on my private dock, the one I built myself on my own property with my own money. The water is clear and calm, reflecting the Montana sky and the mountains in the distance. Trout jump occasionally, leaving ripples that spread across the surface. This is my land, my lake, my peace, and I defended it not out of selfishness but out of principle. In the end, that's what mattered most. The law worked, justice prevailed, and the person who repeatedly violated the rights of others faced real consequences. Patricia Hendricks built a dock on my private lake without permission, so I removed it. She tried to take what wasn't hers, so I banned her and the HOA from my property forever. And when she broke the law, the system held her accountable. Sometimes standing up for what's right isn't easy or popular, but it's always necessary. My lake is still private, my boundaries are still clear, and my property rights are stronger than ever. And on those 6 days a year when I hear children laughing and learning down by the water, I'm reminded that defending principle doesn't mean abandoning generosity. It just means doing both on my own terms, as is my right as the lawful owner of every single acre of this beautiful Montana property. The lake is mine, and it always will be. That's not selfishness, that's justice.